Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to the Bitcoin News Channel. I'm your host, Rob Wallace. The sky is falling. Bitcoin is crashing. Michael Saylor is selling. But we got a lot of things to figure out because Bitcoin is not over. It's far from it. There's actually bubbles going on in other places that'll look a lot more scary than what's going on here. So let's dive right into it. Warren Buffett once called one number the best single measure of whether a market is overvalued. Total market cap divided by GDP. They named it the Buffett indicator. Well, the US is at an all-time high 238%. South Korea is at 243%. And Taiwan is at an astronomical 538%. When a country's stock market is worth far more than the economy underneath it, that's a bubble. And from the looks of it, that is exactly what we are in. The most dangerous moment of any market isn't when everybody's scared. It's when nobody is scared. And from the amount of sheer unbridled risk-taking going on right now, there is not a soul in the markets with a lick of fear. Margin debt is soaring. Leveraged ETF inflows are hitting records. Cash positioning is at all-time lows. And the options market is pricing zero macro risk and zero systemic risk. Underneath all of it sits a $2.5 trillion hole in the AI trade, while credit default swaps on the hyperscalers are surging. A sure sign that the smart money says that confidence is waning. Today, I'm joined by Michael Jordan of the Bitcoin Way to break down why this IPO frenzy is a major danger signal and how the capital rotation happening right now is quietly draining the oxygen from Bitcoin's next move, and how the Bitcoin community is handling this downturn. The bubble is now undeniable. The question is, what do you do before it pops? All right, everybody, let's get right into it. I am joined today by Michael Jordan himself. Sir, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Rob. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. I mean, Bitcoin has seen better days, but at the same time, we're at what, $66,000 for one Bitcoin. If you've been here for a little bit, these are really unbelievable, unprecedented times, and very thankful to have you on the show to break it all down with us. So tell us right now a little bit about who you are and what do you do in Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, appreciate you having me. I am Chief Growth Officer at the Bitcoin Way, so I handle our partnerships. I handle our content creation. I'm host of our podcast. And really our message at the Bitcoin Way is all about self-sovereignty. So we help train people to take proper 100% self-custody of their Bitcoin, counterparty risk-free. We're the trainers. We don't share, you don't need to share a key with us. We don't KYC you, none of the nonsense. We also help with cybersecurity, Plan B residencies. And our goal is just to onboard as many people into a more self-sovereign lifestyle as humanly possible and get as many node runners as we possibly can on the network. I'll add that too.
The good stuff, the nuts and bolts, the sovereignty that attracted so many of us to Bitcoin in the first place. You guys help make it tangible, real, and accessible for everyday people. I think you're doing God's work over there. So awesome what Bitcoin Way does on a daily basis. But today there's a lot of distractions, right? I mean, Bitcoin, we hit an all-time high back in October, and it's been like 6 months of pain. And many people have been saying, oh, the cycles are over. We're going to shoot back up to new all-time highs very, very soon. But there's been a lot of things, as I said earlier, sucking the oxygen out of the Bitcoin room. So what is your opinion right now on markets, general sentiment of Bitcoiners, and where are we going?
That's loaded. A lot of things. So obviously, we're seeing the AI bubble, and you nailed it. I think it's a bubble. These things are. I'm not an investor. I'm not someone who tracks the markets closely, and so I don't know that my analysis is going to be highly technical. But what I see is sort of this replication of the .com bubble, right? Where it's way overhyped, but it's here to stay. AI is going to be paramount to the economy of the future, and candidly, I sympathize with people who recognize that as a great investment opportunity. The challenge is the big players are already in and have probably been in for a long time. And retail isn't going to do likely as well as institutional when it comes to this. You also don't know who's going to win in the end and who's going to win bigger than others and how long of a runway they have before the bubble pops, or at least there's some sort of a correction. And the way I view it is I'm not a professional investor. I'm a professional saver, and I save in Bitcoin. And I save in Bitcoin because of the uncertainty of everything you're describing in the AI sector in particular. So I think we have probably some amount of a runway because I think people are, I recognize that people are using AI more and more. I recognize why even candidly Bitcoin miners would migrate some of their infrastructure to supporting AI. I think there's, if your goal is to return fiat denominated value to shareholders, then there's probably a way of sort of hedging your bet in that sense. And again, I don't know how long it's going to go. The question is who's going to get hurt, who's going to win big, and what are you going to do about it? In the meantime, I'm going to sit back, stack sats, and take self-custody.
Yes. And I mean, with all this talk of bubbles, you do some of the historical research and you look back, and there are different kinds of bubbles, right? There are ones that leave lasting technological change, such as the railroad bubble of the mid 1800s, the internet bubble of the late 1990s. Those things, there was a mania around them. Lots of money got burned being too euphoric in them. But at the end of the day, it left the infrastructure of a technology that radically changed the world. And I agree with you. I think that is what we're seeing with AI, but there's so many indicators to show that we are getting in over our skis when it comes to this stuff. And you gotta be safe. And we've saw it before with altcoins and prior cycles, and now with AI. Bitcoin, it chills for a bit, and then people get bored and they want something shiny. They chase it, and then they wind up with a lot less Bitcoin than if they had just sat pat. So let's dive into some charts right now and take a look at what we are talking about here. So bring this up. What I mentioned before in the intro is the Warren Buffett indicator. It's when you take the valuation of the stock market and divide it by the GDP of a country, right? Like how much the country actually produces on an annual basis. So right now in America, US, the Warren Buffett indicator, we have a 238% reading, right? That means that the stock market, of course, is multiple times higher, 2.38 times higher than the actual economy itself. South Korea, 243%, and Taiwan. Taiwan just overtook India in terms of GDP. In terms of stock market. And so it's got a relatively small GDP of less than $1 trillion, but its stock market is worth almost $5 trillion, right? And so these kind of things, it's kind of clear. You see that we are getting in this unprecedented territory. And that's when it's time to take a chill pill and realize what is actually going on here. We can see this website. This one just is the Warren Buffett indicator, but only goes to March 31st. So a couple of months ago. Back then it was only 219%. Today it's 238%, but you compare it to previous bubble highs, such as the 2000 internet boom, right? We were just at 150 or so percent. And back in the 1929 bubble, that was less than 100, right? So if you combine the 29 bubble in terms of the Warren Buffett indicator and the 1999 stock market bubble, they're still lower than where we are today. Do you see this? Do you feel this just in terms of your everyday life? Do you have people talking to you about the stock market, about stocks, about making money off the market? As of course, the old adage is, once the shoe shine boy is talking to you about stocks, it's time to get out of there. So are you feeling this in your everyday life?
I'm having two different conversations. People who are trying to figure out Bitcoin and what to do with it in light of everything you've just described here with other assets, particularly AI and tech stocks. And I have people who are on the opposite, the downtrend of the K-shaped economy, who are talking about affordability crisis, cost of living, can't afford a home, can't afford to have more kids. And I think you see that very clearly in these numbers that you showed, that the stock market appreciation is to the benefit of the asset holders, the people who, and honestly, the people who have been around longer. Like, you know, we're both millennial age and haven't had the time to accumulate assets that someone like in the boomer generation has. But particularly, I go back to VC, institutional capital. They're the ones really benefiting enormously from the bubble. The question is, which of them are going to get burned when the bubble bursts, and which of them are going to have gambled or speculated on the right particular stocks, companies, infrastructure that they need to be behind. So it is a conversation that I hear more and more. I candidly tend to surround myself more with Bitcoiners these days than with anyone in TradFi. So I don't have quite the tendency to hear from people who are really trying to figure out where to park their capital. If they do, I'm encouraging them to go study Bitcoin, read the Bitcoin Standard, listen to a couple podcasts, listen to your show, and grow their conviction there. Because there is no, I don't have a cheat code for anything else in the economy. I don't have inside information on who's going to win. Is Anthropic's valuation being higher than OpenAI? Is that legitimate? Is that warranted? And in the absence of that sort of information, I, I just, it just feels, it feels like speculation. Everything just feels like a gamble. And I had James Lavish on our podcast a month or so ago, and he was talking about this culture of gambling, Polymarket, Kalshi, in chasing the next big thing like AI. That's really what it amounts to ultimately, I think, is people gamble, at least for retail, because we don't have inside information. It's just a big casino that we're all playing because we're trying to get ahead. My advice and non-financial advice for people who have a longer runway, if you're, sort of Gen Z, millennial, maybe even earlier Gen X, just study Bitcoin, stack sats, and you're going to not have some of the outsized returns that someone who happens to get the right AI investment in is going to have, but you're going to sleep in peace at night knowing that you don't have to worry about the bubble bursting. Like there isn't a bubble to be burst when it comes to what you're protecting and securing with your future wealth.
Yeah, so many great things you just brought up. The K-shaped economy is crazy. I mean, 10% of the country owns 90% of the stocks here in America, right? In terms of value. So yeah, the bubble is really helping the upper end, and they are keeping this economy chugging along, whereas the bottom half of the K is having a hard time. If you do not have assets right now, you are really feeling left behind. You see it in some other countries that are more swept up in this mania, especially Korea right now. Korea is going insane. You have pensioners that are taking out their life insurance to invest in the market. You have the hottest thing to wear on a date is the name of a memory company. You wear their logo on the back of your shirt, and you're gonna do well on your first date over there. And there's just so many anecdotal stories of people just leveraging everything. I think as a society, Korea might be even more into gambling than America is. But at the same time, it shows you that there are these pockets of extreme mania that are taking over entire countries right now. And so we might be a little bit behind that here in America. But at the same time, it does seem as if we're getting closer and closer to that. And one of the big signs of a top when it comes to market bubbles are massive IPOs, companies that waited until these big run-ups to become public, and then insiders can just dump their shares on the retail. So let's take a look here at this tweet that sort of explains how this could be related to Bitcoin. So this is from Thierry from RV. New guy, just seen him post a couple of times over the last couple of weeks, but he's had some really good ones. And this one I found particularly interesting. Bitcoin just dropped from 74,000 to 67,500 in 48 hours on no real news. One thesis that fits the data: the exit liquidity rotation has begun. In the next months, 4 companies are raising over $350 billion in fresh equity. SpaceX IPO, $75 billion. OpenAI just raised $100 billion. Anthropic just raised another $100 billion. Google net equity issuance, $80 billion. That money has to come from somewhere: existing portfolios, risk on capital, cash. Bitcoin is the most liquid risk on asset on earth. Selling it is the fastest way to free up dollars without triggering tax events on long-held equity positions. If the most religious Bitcoin holders, the corporate treasuries, the funds, the whales, are even partially rotating to participate in the largest IPO cycle in history, you don't need a news catalyst to explain the drop. You just need the supply curve to flip. This isn't bearish on Bitcoin long term. It's a sign that the entire risk on crowd is preparing to absorb the largest equity issuance year since 2000. When the marginal Bitcoin holder needs to be on a SpaceX cap table, Bitcoin goes down for reasons that have nothing to do with Bitcoin. The exit liquidity avalanche doesn't just hit overvalued stocks, it hits anything liquid. So yeah, I mean, this is the chart over the last 2 days. It's been pretty wild to see. I think it's been the third worst liquidation event in the last 2-3 years. So this was definitely one to remember. I mean, it's crazy how we have these dates now that are sort of plastered in our head over the last year. 10-10, 2-5, 6-2. I mean, if you understand what those mean, then you're definitely a Bitcoiner. But at the same time, price doesn't matter. One Bitcoin's one Bitcoin. But let's talk about this thesis that the people could be selling Bitcoin to get liquidity to get into these big IPOs. Do you have any thoughts on this?
At first glance, the thesis seems reasonable. Bitcoin is. I don't perceive Bitcoin to be a risk-on asset. I perceive it to be a form of money and a form of savings, and risk off if you zoom out and look at the macro picture. But we're, Rob, you and I are in 1% of the population who recognizes that or believes something similar to that. And so it makes sense that people they have Bitcoin, they see a potential boom in AI, they want to, roll that into something else. I think it's a very nearsighted way. It's a very high time preference way of viewing the market and viewing your financial future. Because at the end of the day, even if you hit the ball out of the park on an AI investment, it's in fiat denominated returns. There's execution risk, there's regulatory risk, so many. I think that's the thing that is difficult for me, because I step back and look at, okay, even if you're investing like in a Bitcoin treasury company, I'm someone with high conviction in Bitcoin. I'm completely disinterested, because if Michael Saylor gets hit by a bus, what happens to strategy? I don't know. Do they continue to have the conviction that he's had? Maybe not. I certainly think it would have a meaningful impact on the stock price or any other investment vehicle you might have through them. And the same is really true with any of these others. If Elon Musk got hit by a bus and you were investing in SpaceX because they have a Bitcoin treasury, or you're invested in Twitter because of any number of reasons, you're exposed in so many ways. Never mind the counterparty risk, the fact that if you kind of go down other rabbit holes, you don't really own those things, right? In a worst case scenario, that all gets rolled up to another entity, and your stocks aren't actually yours; they're permissioned. All of those things, capital gains taxes. There's so many layers of risk here. But to the point you've made, I can understand that people say, "Hey, I perceive an investment opportunity, no matter how speculative Michael thinks it is. And I've got this Bitcoin sitting on the sidelines, especially at the institutional level where they hold a lot, right? But Michael Saylor and Strategy hold a lot more Bitcoin than I do. So when not them in particular, because I don't think that's what they're doing, but if others like them are making moves into AI or any technology, any industry that they think seems promising for the future, Bitcoin's going to feel that sell pressure. And is retail demand there to make up for it? It doesn't appear so, right? And actually, River, I think, had a chart on this over, I think it was maybe a 2025 chart, and it showed the growth in institutional adoption of Bitcoin and the reduction in retail holdings of Bitcoin. And so while for the last 17 years, 15 of the last 17 years, largely it was this slow growth retail adoption that has propelled Bitcoin forward. The last couple of years, a lot of that buy side pressure has been from institutions, larger organizations, not just Rob and Michael, smash buying when there's a dip or something like that. So I'm not saying that this is my thesis. It makes complete sense, though, why that would be the case.
Yeah, you bring up a good point in terms of these institutional buyers having different time preference and desires than, say, you or I, who go into Bitcoin for the sovereign purposes, the fact that it is completely outside the system, we can go anywhere with it, and we feel much safer having an asset that is not custody by somebody else, right? So you're right. Last year, also, there was all these Bitcoin treasury companies, and we've seen the complete destruction of so many of them, down 70, 80, 90, 99%, right? In the case of Naka, the company that runs Bitcoin Magazine, the conference, there's a lot of shareholder value that's been destroyed in these Bitcoin treasury companies, and they don't have the same conviction that believers like you and I do, right? So we saw Sequence, a French company that makes like Internet of Things devices. They went big into Bitcoin. They wanted to buy over $1 billion worth, and they just got done selling all of it, right? It's less than a 1 year long experiment of buying a bunch of Bitcoin at the top and selling it low. So yeah, I mean, And of course, there a lot of these companies that got into the Bitcoin treasury craze last year were doing it just to chase the fad. And now, I mean, you saw a Spanish coffee company get into Bitcoin treasury, right? There was a Canadian company that I think did food before, and now did Bitcoin treasuries, and now they're pivoting to AI. So just a lot of trend chasers and that don't have the same conviction that you or I.
And Rob, I think the thing for me is the future of AI is uncertain. Who's going to win? To what extent they're going to win? How many big players are going to emerge? The future of the dollar is certain. It's going to continue to trend to zero. It's so if I just use that as sort of the framework by which I think about the world, okay, what do I need to make sure that I'm avoiding? It's the dollar sitting in cash, which is obviously a melting ice cube, or and probably an exploding ice cube at some point in the future. And what's the alternative to that? The alternative is not, in my mind, to, well, I need to get so many dollars that the melting ice cube problem is less. I need to get something that is simply not melting, and that's what Bitcoin represents. Bitcoin is not simply an alternative to the dollar. It is an opt out of the dollar. When you bet on AI, you might win in dollar terms, and I hope anyone who is doing this does. Right? It's like there's no ill wish for anyone who's investing in AI. I'm a reasonable person who can understand why you might be inclined to do that. You just have to remember that at the end of the day, you are still operating within the dollar system, and the dollar system is on a slow path toward death. And so I think about my future, and I've got 30, 50 years. Okay, if that's where the dollar's headed, where do I need to be? Bitcoin, self-custody, run a node, make sure I'm as sovereign as possible. I'm building a little compound with those people closest to me. Like, those are the things I can do in my life to better my life, that I can, again, continue sleeping in peace, knowing I'm not hoping that Sam Altman executes. And by the way, I hope Sam Altman does not execute on everything he seems to want in this world, but hoping that he or any executive at any AI company executes properly in order for me to be best positioned in fiat terms. It's just completely disinteresting to me.
And let's take the AI thesis to its logical conclusion, right? I mean, why are they getting all this money? Because the people who are investing in them think that at the end of the day, they can replace wages, right? That they can totally just automate all labor. And when you automate all labor, that means that you take away people's jobs. And when people don't have jobs, they can't buy anything. So what are they going to have to do? Sam Altman thinks UBI is the answer. Just the government hands out money to people who have been displaced because of the AI automation. And that means that a lot of money printing. And what is there to absorb all this money printing? Bitcoin, right? So how much do you believe in that? Do you think that AI will replace jobs? And how does Bitcoin play into that AI thesis?
Well, I think the evidence suggests that AI is replacing jobs currently to some degree. I think it's going to continue to replace certain jobs over a long enough time horizon. It will continue to replace more jobs. I tend to assume that there is work for humanity to do, regardless of an AI world. And I also, the group of people who I think are actually going to benefit in the future are the real artists and craftsmen of the world, who can produce something unique that AI can't produce because it's not human. For example, if you're a musician, you hone your craft, people are going to crave going to a live performance, seeing a flesh and blood human being performing a song that they wrote, and being around other people, because we've migrated so far from that, where now kids are sitting around playing video games remotely, and they're not going out and hanging out with their friends the way that probably we did in the 90s, and certainly in the 60s, 70s, when people didn't have a smartphone in their pocket. And I think that level of engagement is going to be very important. So I think there are going to be big winners, especially in the arts, when it comes to AI. But I also I can't foresee how it's all going to play out. I just tend to assume humanity has always overcome these big technical achievements when it comes, when horses were displaced by cars. Now suddenly we have more efficiency. We have taxi drivers, and we have, what it's going to be with AI, because it seems to fundamentally replace aspects of humanity that seem irreplaceable. I don't know what it will be, but I imagine it can get better. I don't think I envision this world where people just don't work. We don't need money, because I think humanity will largely sort of sort of resist that, because we need work, we need something to strive for in order to achieve a sense of fulfillment in life. If you don't have something to get up, to wake up for every day, what are we even doing here? And I think eventually we just kind of get like an organic emergent pushback on the areas that we say no, like humans need to be involved in this or that, and that's what we want to do. And what that will be is anybody's guess. It's certainly not for me to speculate on.
Yeah, humans, man, needs meaning, right? We need a reason to get out of bed, and being able to provide for yourself and others has been one that has, of course, been with us since the beginning of time. And also, I think that like we're primates on a certain level, and we like to play status games. And right now, your occupation, your level of wealth allows you to play that in the modern fiat economy. But even if AI is able to replace all of our work, we're still going to try to find ways for status games. And so whether that's who can play the best guitar live in front of people, or who can write the best poem, whatever, we're still gonna find ways in order to try to stand out as human beings, and make our worth known to the world and to ourselves. So
I could see a something of a renaissance where people are where you have the opportunity to go actually build a craft. Because at least, so this is my view. Let's just use music as an example. I think back to the 1970s, like that's my 70s, 80s, like that's my era of music that I listened to, and that was pre-auto tune. Those singers were just incredible. Those guitarists were just unbelievable. They had practiced and refined their craft in such a way that I still appreciate the music, even though the recording quality wasn't as good as it necessarily is today. Now it's just kind of dull, and it's the same song over and over, at least in my view. And we've sort of accepted that. But I think at some point we say, okay, enough is enough. I'm not looking for a quick dopamine hit. I'm looking for lyrics that resonate with me, that I can appreciate. I'm looking for someone who I can look at on stage, or listen to an album and understand that they have in some way perfected a craft that is admirable. And that's what humans need. And AI doesn't deliver on that. I think it'll be great for rote nonsense work that humans have had to do for the last 50 years because of increased compliance requirements and all the paper pushing that exists in corporate America and DC. And I experienced a lot of that. But that's not fulfilling work anyway. You're sitting for 8-9 hours a day under blue lights in a cubicle. I don't think humanity was designed for that. I think we're going to see more homesteaders, more artists, more people just getting back to the basics of life. So I'm very optimistic about the future, especially in light of the existence of Bitcoin.
yeah, and why was that music valuable? Because those skills were scarce, right? And Bitcoin is the ultimate scarce asset. And so I think that in this world of coming abundance, Bitcoin is going to serve a role as that primary scarce asset that people are going to want in the age of AI and ahead. So yeah, we could have an extremely bright, very different future. But it's the transition to getting there that I think has a lot of people worried. And we're going to see a lot of tumult and volatility. And one of the things that will probably bring some of that volatility is these big AI labs going public. So I want to talk about this because it does seem as if this could mark the top, or just be a huge way for retail to get dumped on. What is going on here? So they changed the rules for SpaceX. SpaceX is going public very, very quickly. The index providers waived the profitability requirement and cut the seasoning window from 90 days to 5. This forces over $30 trillion in passive 401k and retirement money to buy SpaceX at IPO valuations. Bloomberg Intelligence estimates S&P 500 funds must absorb 19% of SpaceX float within 6 months. Russell 1000 and NASDAQ 100 funds will absorb 24%. The rules built to protect passive investors. S&P 500 has required 12 months of trading and 4 quarters of GAAP profitability since 2002. Both of those waived. NASDAQ cut its inclusion window from 90 trading days to 15. The Russell cut it to 5. All 3 benchmarks are now structured to buy SpaceX at the IPO pricing. Crazy, crazy. So your 401k is going to be positioned into SpaceX, buying it at the top. These IPO valuations, usually, I mean, we saw it with Facebook, we saw it with Coinbase when the tech companies finally go public, they're marched to perfection, and then it goes down a lot. So, of course, both Facebook and Coinbase have recovered from their IPO drawdowns, but at the same time, why are they getting rid of these rules at this time for the biggest IPO of all time? This thing's over $1.5 trillion valuation at the IPO, 90 PE, price to earnings ratio, which is really unheard of for an IPO. I mean, it's going to take 90 years of their earnings to buy back the stock at the valuation, which at IPOs, like it's crazy levels. And if we look at here, it doesn't stop. I mean, 3 companies about to IPO at higher combined value than all of the 2,600 .com IPOs from 95 to 2000 combined. SpaceX, OpenAI, Anthropic, 3.75 trillion. Every .com IPO from 95 to 2000, inflation adjusted, 3 trillion. 3 names versus 2,600 names. The 90s mania had pets.com, Webban, eToys. This mania has 3 companies, each one priced at generational opportunity. Manias used to be diversified. This one is concentrated. History says concentration is what makes the unwinding faster, not slower. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just bringing this all up for people to be aware of what's happening. It's like happening now, right? I don't The Anthropic won't go public until the fall, I believe, but SpaceX is happening this month. So be aware. And also, so many people are just so used to passive investing, right? They just put their money into an index fund and think it will be taken care of. It's diversified. Well, more than half of the gains of the S&P 500 this year have been from 10 names, right? So you are actually extremely concentrated in your risk when you go into these supposedly diversified index funds. So yeah, I mean, this could be it. This could be why we're seeing Bitcoin dip right now. People getting liquidity. Bitcoin is the easiest asset to sell 24/7, 365. So people could be getting that liquidity to prepare to buy into these IPO valuations that are extremely rich. Any final thoughts on this, the IPO AI bubble stuff going on?
Well, first of all, if you thought that the feud between Trump and Elon Musk was legitimate, maybe this has you second guessing those assumptions. It seems like a lot of special favors, and SpaceX is going to benefit immensely from some of these requirements being waived, of course. It took, I can't remember, it took Apple, what, 40 years or something like that to hit $1 trillion valuation. Years of innovating, showing profitability, grinding, I mean, changing the world. You can argue for better, for worse. I think the iPhone was probably one of the worst. I have one, but one of the worst inventions of all time when it comes to us remaining human. But like true innovation happened over those decades. And now we've got companies who are a fraction of the profitability that justifies the valuation that they're at going public. I think what Anthropic's at 900 something million. They're almost at $1 trillion valuation, and they haven't even gone public. And so the people who are going to benefit that again are the institutional investors, the VCs, the people who were in early, the people with inside information. I think, it's such a crazy market, and for anyone to not recognize the bubble that we've been talking about this entire time for what it is, and to be FOMOing in, it just feels really concerning. There are just too many unknowns at this point, and obviously it's a big club and you ain't in it, because that's what you just showed. The rules being waived, the changes, and this is the problem with fiat, a system that is governed by the rules of humans. The rules are going to be changed, and they're not going to be to your advantage. They're going to be to the advantage of the people who have access to the rule books, who have access to the capital, the money printer, and you can try playing their game. I think most people are just going to get absolutely burned, which is what largely happens when you have a bubble. Is the average person who tried to play within the fiat system got burned because no one's looking out for you. They're changing the rules to benefit the insiders. So those rules aren't being waived for the benefit of people who have pensions or 401ks. They're being changed for the benefit of Elon Musk. And so for me, I mean, practically, that's kind of the way I approach this. But philosophically, I just want nothing to do with that. There's almost like a moral pull for me to just say, even if I thought I could play that market and benefit, I want nothing to do with it. I'd rather right now, I have no interest in being an investor, because I'm just a guy. but I have every bit of interest and incentive in just being a saver, especially because I now know that there is a savings vehicle that exists external to the system, decentralized, no law, no regulation changes the protocol. No one can manipulate it. No one can print more of it. So I'm going to keep stacking sats.
Yeah, and we're all trying to figure out why Bitcoin isn't keeping up, right? And so this is one explanation that we just discussed. People are letting go of some Bitcoin to get liquidity to invest into these big IPOs. And I mean, if we just look at this stock market, got to compare some charts. I mean, this is the S&P 500 since last October. And of course, I bring up October because that was the peak of Bitcoin at 126,000. And so it was grinding its up and then went down hard when the war started. And it's been straight up. Like, this is very unusual, weird to see the S&P 500. Like, this is $70 trillion, right? The S&P 500, and it's just gaining like 10, like what exactly, how much from the bottom are we up? It's up 20%, right? In a couple of months since the war started. To see a $60 trillion, $50 trillion asset go up 20% in that time is pretty insane. And then we got to compare it to Bitcoin here, right? This was the top back in October. This is the same time frame. Sorry, this is the peak in October. And we started the year around 90. We were able to get up to 97 in January. And then February, of course, as I said before, 1010 is when we crashed here. 2.5 is when we crashed here. And then yesterday was 6.2, this crash here. So why hasn't Bitcoin been able to keep up? Well, one thing that has happened since February, since the end of February, is the war in Iran, right? So many people thought that we would have catastrophic oil prices because the Strait of Hormuz has been closed down, that the world is short around 12 to 14 million barrels of oil on a daily basis. And so add that up over the last 3 months, we are short over 1 billion to 1.5 billion barrels of oil compared to what we are usually consuming on a daily basis here on planet Earth. How have we survived? How have we not had great ramifications of this so far? Well, we're just drawing down all of our reserves. Everybody around the world is just going to tap out relatively soon. This summer, many countries are going to hit well bottom when it comes to their strategic petroleum reserves. And we've yet to really feel the economic ramifications of this oil shortage, but Bitcoin is showing something. Maybe there's a tie between the war in Iran and what is going on with the Bitcoin price. So Alistair Milne put this out yesterday. My own theory, which yesterday confirmed, at least in my mind, is that this is all about Iran. In my opinion, any coins that could have been linked to the Iran or IRGC have been dumped to avoid possible sanctions, to buy weapons, resources, etc. Of course, Iran is like one of the top 3, if not the most sanctioned country in the world over the last 50 years. And Bitcoin allows them to interact on the global market as a neutral money. And he says, of course not. It was not only Iran selling, but it explains the feeling of constant sell pressure, even at obvious support levels, and being quite BTC specific. And it's true. I mean, Iran definitely mined Bitcoin. They have energy, they have oil, they could mine very cheaply. And they definitely, being sanctioned for so long, saw the value of Bitcoin as a reserve asset. And if you're at war, it costs a lot of money. If you're cut off from the rest of the planet, what are you going to do? You're going to sell the one thing that you can sell, just as people selling Bitcoin for liquidity to get into IPOs. Iran could very well be selling tens, if not maybe hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin in order to fund this war effort. And we see it happening. It's acknowledged by the West here. So I'll get into some more details, but I want to get your initial thoughts on the Iran conflict, Bitcoin as neutral money, and the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, to the extent that the Iran conflict isn't concocted, which I'm not 100% convinced of, I don't have any particular data or facts to back that up. I just have a sneaking suspicion of politicians, and what they're telling us is Iran's the enemy, Israel's our ally, they hate each other, we're at war because we want to stop them from building a nuke, which is what we've been trying to do for 30 years or whatever. You know, they're like a week away from having a nuke. And so the fact that we're now at war with them is sort of an indication to me, and that the mainstream media is pushing this narrative on us that this is why we're at war, tells me that's probably why we're not at war, or not why we're at war. It's probably something else. Let's assume though this war is legitimate. It's two sides who hate each other. We're fearful of Iran building a nuke. It would seem to me in Iran's best interest to stack sats and to continue to maintain something outside of the dollar system, or the fiat system globally, because you're right, they can't really trade otherwise. Now, is that what they're doing? Like, are they just running low on capital and they need to sell something in order to get some sort of fiat currency to transact? Perhaps. I still, at the end of the day, when I see Bitcoin's volatility up or down, I don't tend to assume that there's like a single macroeconomic factor. It's some country dumping, it's sailor buying, because sailor buying doesn't really impact price apparently. I don't tend to assume it's one of those things. I think in general, it's this very small percentage of the global population, call it 0.5% or 1%, who understands Bitcoin well enough to actually hold some, like truly hold some. And they're not just, they didn't go on Coinbase and buy $5 worth. It's you and me. And then it's probably less toxic maxis who think that maybe that is part of their crypto portfolio. There are a lot of people with weak hands, and we've been hovering around 70,000. There hasn't been a big pump. And I think eventually a lot of people just capitulate and they say, I can't do this anymore. I think it's not going to work, or maybe I'll buy it 90,000 if it goes back up, and yeah, I'm going to lose a little bit, but in the meantime, I don't have to stomach the volatility. Because what if we go down to 40? Too many people are just looking at numbers on a dashboard, first of all, because they're not in self-custody and they're looking at their Coinbase account or some other place. And they just probably haven't built the conviction required to say, crazy things are going to happen. Lettuce hands are going to sell. And I just need to ride this out as long as I can. If you're an older investor and you're on fixed income, I completely understand that, right? Like, you've got to feed your family. You've got to finish paying off your house if that's not complete. Do what you need to do to make it, and try to hold on to as much Bitcoin as you possibly can in the meantime. Don't expose yourself to counterparty risk. That's your generational wealth that I think you pass down to your kids. But my tendency is just to assume that there are a lot of people who are earlier in their journey, or are just kind of tired of riding these waves of volatility, and they cash out and will regret it immensely 10 years from now. So the war in Iran, speaking of the war in Iran, I think the effects of the closing of the strait we haven't even seen what's coming yet. I think we're still very early. All of these big macroeconomic trends take years, if not sometimes decades, for the consequences to fully manifest in the world. After COVID, they printed, $6 trillion in, I guess it's 2000, 2001. And then it wasn't until a year or two later that we really saw those big inflationary prints. It's been an upward trajectory of inflation, but sometimes it's a decision, a president, or a war made something that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that you begin to see later on. We see that with anything government subsidized or regulated. Prices don't just shoot up immediately. It's over time you begin to see things deteriorate. And I think the same is probably going to be true with the war. What all of the consequences will be, I don't know. I think it's going to be particularly devastating for places that are less energy independent. Like, I think the United States can drill. We've got probably more nuclear that's going to come online, especially with the AI boom. In places like Europe, who are dependent on Russian oil and natural gas, and they're much more dependent on oil and a lot of raw materials passing through the strait, they're going to be incredibly impacted. I'm personally very grateful I'm not in Europe right now.
Yes. Okay. So there's so much I want to dive in on that. More details with Iran, how they're using Bitcoin, what's going on over there. But before we do that, we got to give a shout out to our sponsors of the show, Rhino Bitcoin, good friends of the program. Why is Rhino important? Well, before, getting access to Bitcoin financial services was slow, clunky, and scattered across multiple platforms, each with its own limitations. But Rhino is changing that. Rhino is a next generation Bitcoin banking app designed to handle all your Bitcoin needs in one place. Here's what you can do with Rhino. Of course, you can buy Bitcoin with the lowest fees anywhere. Make payments over the Lightning Network. Send cash globally, fast and easy, all on Bitcoin rails, and set up automatic saving plans. So you stack sats on your schedule and build wealth over time. And you can also get loans straight in the app itself. They have partnered with Arch, and now you can get a loan right from your Rhino Bitcoin app. Soon you'll be able to pay bills, direct deposit, and save for retirement, all seamlessly within Rhino. And of course, security is a top priority. Biometric verification, 24/7 fraud protection, and the confidence of knowing your Bitcoin is never rehypothecated. So download Rhino today at rhinobitcoin.com. Of course, it's for iOS or Android. Use the code Bitcoin News, one word, Bitcoin News, and Rhino will drop you $10 in free Bitcoin into your account just for getting started. Rhino is built to keep you in control of your Bitcoin every minute of the day. Well, yes, Rhino is super good for getting your Bitcoin, DCAing, getting your stack up. And I think that's what Iran has been doing. And we got to talk about some of these details because it really is crazy how Bitcoin sort of has been playing a pivotal role in this battle between the world hegemon right now, the US, and this country that's been a thorn in the US side for a very long time. Know a lot of great Iranian people, but the IRGC, they have been using Bitcoin for some things. Let's get into it. So Bitcoin has struggled in recent weeks as tensions between the US and the Iran continue to escalate, and there are growing signs that Bitcoin is sitting closer to the center of the conflict than many realize. Iran is moving to formally codify its Bitcoin-powered toll system for vessels seeking safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. So, of course, this is the Hormuz Safe, their insurance package that they are selling. If ships want to get through the Strait of Hormuz, they need to pay $1 per barrel of oil that they have on the ship. A lot of these have around 2 million barrels worth of oil. So that's $2 million in Bitcoin to get through the Strait of Hormuz. This is going to become formally a law soon. It is in their parliament and it looks to be moving forward. At the same time, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent revealed that the U.S. has seized nearly $1 billion in crypto linked to the Iranian exchanges and wallets since the conflict began. And they have not announced if any of that is Bitcoin, but they have said that they have over $500 million worth of Tether that they have frozen from the IRGC. Today, the U.S. sanctioned Nobitex, Iran's largest crypto exchange, alleging ties to sanctions evasion, IRGC-linked transactions, ransomware activity, and helping move assets out of the country after U.S. military action. The Treasury also reiterated that payments made to secure passage through the Strait of Hormuz, including those made in Bitcoin, could expose participants to sanctions risk. So they're saying if you pay in Bitcoin, we're going to sanction you, even if you're not Iranian, if say you're an Indian oil tanker. To be clear, when U.S. officials talk about crypto seizures, they are primarily referring to stablecoins rather than Bitcoin, as I said before. But the repeated appearance of Bitcoin and crypto infrastructure in sanctions enforcement, maritime trade, and geopolitical strategy suggests digital assets are becoming part of the battlefield. So, I mean, this is pretty crazy, right? I mean, the sanctioned country in the world, Iran, is using Bitcoin to get through this. And it really plays out a lot of Bitcoiner game theory that we've been talking about for years, that Bitcoin is for enemies, whether you wear an orange tie or you are shooting off rockets for the IRGC. It's neutral money, right? A tool is a tool. And when is Bitcoin most valuable? When you need it the most. And if you're heavily sanctioned and at war, it seems as if Bitcoin is extremely valuable. Do you think that this is a big, say, use case for Bitcoin in the future as a neutral reserve currency in a multipolar world?
I absolutely do. Regardless of your opinions about Iran, I'm against the war. I'm not pro Iran. I'm not pro Israel US. I don't take much of a stance. I don't like seeing people die for no reason. I think this is a massive use case. And I have a feeling Iran is going to, or perhaps as in the past, made some mistakes that are going to make it easier to sanction them because we know that they have certain coins. They've more or less KYC'd themselves to the world, I would suspect. What I think they're going to do, though, is they're going to build a playbook for others who know that they're going to need to evade sanctions in the future. Okay, how can we improve upon what Iran did? They demonstrate the use case on a global scale, and I think that's awesome. I think every country should be prepared for that. I think especially small countries that are sort of at the whims of what the U.S. or the European Union or other global powers want from them. I think those countries really need to step up, like El Salvador And it's a really big deal what Iran is doing. It's I would tend to assume that any of these coins that have been seized, any of the crypto assets that have been seized, are largely not Bitcoin, because it'd be very challenging for them to understand with any level of certainty what's Iran's Bitcoin, but Tether. Yeah, I mean, you can freeze those transactions immediately. You can't freeze the Bitcoin transaction if they're operating through exchanges that you have some sort of regulatory oversight with. Then okay, they can cause some problems, but Bitcoin's peer-to-peer electronic cash. And so if Iran wants to start doing business exclusively with China or Russia or any of their allies, they have that option with Bitcoin. And there's nothing that the US regulating Bitcoin Well or River, any of the Coinbase, any of these big exchanges, there's nothing that the United States can do about that. And when more countries wake up to that fact and recognize really what's playing out here, they're going to want to know, how do I get a hold of Bitcoin? Can we mine it privately? Because then it's virgin Bitcoin. We don't have to tether this to our identity in any way. And I think we're going to see more and more of these use cases crop up, especially because the world is just in chaos right now. And we're seeing sanctions in a lot of countries, and more of a protectionist mindset that many nations are taking, because they don't know who the good guys are anymore. They don't know who the bad guys are anymore. They know that the dollar could be weaponized against them. We saw that during the Biden administration in Russia. And if nothing else, you're gonna find whatever life raft you can. And maybe Bitcoin isn't perfect because you accumulate it in some way that's sort of tied back to, well, this is owned by the Russian government or something, but it's going to give you a hell of a lot more flexibility than the dollar, than the yuan, that you can't spend in half of the world, and you can't trust what they're going to do at the central bank level in terms of interest rates or increasing the supply of circulating cash. So I think this is an incredible use case. Excited, regardless of my opinions on Iran or not, because I think it just demonstrates for the world what Bitcoin really can achieve.
100%. And before we close out the show, I want to talk to you about sentiment, right? Right now, Bitcoiners, we're going through it. It's kind of rough. Last time Bitcoin went down was the end of 2022, beginning of 23, and all markets were down, right? So it was a little bit easier to swallow that pill. But right now, everything else is ripping, while Bitcoin is 50% down from the all-time high. And there's a lot of infighting within the community. People are going at each other. There's quantum FUD. You're talking to a lot of Bitcoiners on a daily basis. What do you say to them to keep their spirits up? And what's your tap on the pulse of the Bitcoin community right now?
I think sentiment's down for a lot of people, and for obvious reasons, not reasons that particularly resonate with me personally. There are really two things that I think people need to do. First of all, you need to just grow your conviction in Bitcoin. I think a lot of people kind of go on autopilot after a while, and they listen to the same podcasts, hear the same voices, and they're not really growing their conviction in what it is Bitcoin does. But if you just look at TikTok next block, you understand what it represents. You understand it as the only non-sovereign asset that you can hold, that no one can manipulate, and can't be confiscated. It's permissionless, all of the things we talk about all the time in the Bitcoin space. You just grow your conviction in those. And until that changes, what else are you going to do? What else are you going to invest your wealth in? What else do you think could compete for the future of money? And in the interim, there is nothing but Bitcoin. It stands alone. The second thing I would say is you really have to have a philosophical or moral conviction during these times, because for me, where I have grown over the last I've only been in Bitcoin for 4 years, but what's really begun to, especially having a family, I think about, how do I want to raise my kids? I want them to know that at a time when it would have been easy to just keep doing the same thing and relying on the government, relying on fiat financial advice, speculating on the AI boom, I said, I want nothing to do with that system. I opted out. I made a moral stance based on how I feel we need to direct the world best we can toward a Bitcoin standard, toward neutral money, towards something that no one can manipulate. And that's something I hope I'll be able to hang my hat on. So it's money, it's the way I'm homeschooling my kids, it's the way that I opt out of fiat food. It's like this whole litany of things that the money is the base layer of it, and understanding Bitcoin and securing your financial future is critical. But once you open your eyes to that, a lot of the other behavioral changes you can make, and the habits you can form really fall into place, and it becomes a philosophical break from everything that you knew before. And that's really what my life has represented over the last almost half decade.
Yeah, and the longer you spend in here, the easier it becomes, right? You've gone through ups and downs before, and you know that you've survived and come out the other end better off than you were before. It does change you on a deep philosophical level. I completely agree, and it aligns you with that low time preference, being able to take the wider view and have patience for what you know and what you believe in, and not being willing to just jump around to all these different shiny new objects. I think one thing that is hard about being a Bitcoiner, like, we are philosophically aligned with this, and part of it is the satisfaction of being right, and when people are dunking on Bitcoin and saying that that veneer of being right sort of gets beat upon, but that's okay. It teaches you some humility, and if you have studied Bitcoin and you know what is actually going on, you know that there's really nothing else you want to trade it for. So just sit tight, be willing to grind this out, and you will be rewarded. Patience will be rewarded. This is an asset that is absolutely scarce. There's only 21 million of them. And if you're able to look back a year from now and say, hey, actually I have more Bitcoin today than I did back then, you're in a much better position. So yes, be willing to bear through this and scoop up some cheap sats.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. And you have to just keep in mind that last comment, being right might mean Bitcoin hits $1 million and then you get to go tell all your friends and family that you were right. Being right also might mean that you took self-custody and you weren't trapped into a CBDC and forced to spend your money at a certain time on certain things. And I think that's coming to a lot of the world. So what being right looks like could be a multitude of possibilities, and you just need to be ready for any of them and comfortable with waiting it out. Because if you're buying Bitcoin, if you're taking self custody, you are going to be right about something, and probably many things, over the next 5 or 10 years. And you just need to be ready and to your point, humble, patient, and maybe, when Bitcoin pumps, you just don't brag about it so much at the dinner table with your family, because it'll probably dip again. It's right. It's a small percentage of us who get it. And so there's going to be volatility and bumps along the way. But keep stacking, stay humble. It's all the same things we talk about all the time.
Absolutely. All right. So if people want to take their Bitcoin journey even more seriously, you guys help them out at the Bitcoin Way. Tell people what you do and how they can find you.
Yeah. So like I said at the beginning, we train our clients on proper Bitcoin self-custody. So setting up an air-gapped open source Bitcoin only hardware wallet. We only recommend the best tools. Running a node. Everyone should be running a node for privacy, decentralization. You got to be the one to verify your transactions. Don't trust, verify. We just walk you through that. We guide you. I was a client before I started working with the team. It's a fantastic bulletproof process. Again, no KYC, no counterparty risk, none of the nonsense you get with almost any other custodial setup you could think of. But we also help with online privacy, setting up privacy phones. So if you want to take sovereignty over your digital life as well, we can help you with that. Everyone needs to be considering those options. And then if you want a plan B, because you are somewhere that's getting crazy and you can't be sure how much of your wealth you're going to have to give to the government every year, or they're surveilling you or sending you to prison for social media posts, we can help get you out of there. It's not just for the rich and famous anymore. The options exist for more normal plebs, which is a fantastic thing. So yeah, go to thebitcoinway.com, you can schedule a call, subscribe to our newsletter. It's fantastic. And make sure you follow us on X as well. It's at @thebitcoinway_.
Absolutely do that. You guys create a lot of great content as well, which you are in charge of. Always awesome to see your interviews. And thank you everybody for tuning in. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe. If you're on Twitter, retweet this stream so that everybody can see what we've been talking about in terms of the AI IPO bubble and Iran and Bitcoin. So much interesting things happening in this market. Never a dull moment. Thank you for tuning in. This has been Rob Wallace with Michael Jordan of the Bitcoin Way. Until next time, we will see you next Wednesday at 11 a.m.